All right. So I think we're all set now. So, hello once again. My name is Max Johnson, Senior Planner with Mid-Coast Council of Governments.
Emily Raby with Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission.
And thank you to our workshop today on the, I'm always going to mess up the name, the Congressional Directed Spending and the Community Project Funding Workshop. Yeah, I got those right. So I won't take up too much time on the introductions because I've already done it before the recording, but I'll let our guests quickly give themselves an introduction, starting over here with Zach.
Good afternoon, Zach Schmesser from Congressman Golden's office.
Chuck Mahaleris with U.S. Senator Susan Collins, Augusta office.
Jeanne Christie with Congresswoman Pingree's office out of Florida.
And Cole Cerabona with Senator Jeanne's office.
So the way today is going to work is we are going to have Chuck and Jeanne quickly give some background information on the Senate and the House process, and then we'll just lean right into the question and answers. And for people on Zoom who are attending late, just make sure you type your name into the chat just for our records. So without further ado, Chuck, I'll leave it to you.
Thanks. So my name is Chuck. I've been with the senator for 20 years. And this year, since August, I've been doing dual role as staff assistant, helping folks with their IRS integrations, VA, et cetera, and also helping with the office as a state office rep. Ellie had moved on to another position, so I've been kind of doing two tasks. So just want to give you a little bit of overview. The Senate side and the House side are a little different on how they approach it, but I wanted to give you the overview. The appropriations process gives an opportunity for members of Congress to provide assistance to local organizations and municipalities. The idea being that members of Congress usually know better than the agencies of what the needs are in the community. And the Congressionally Directed Spending Program is a way for us to help fill those needs. This opportunity is open to all members of the Senate and the House. Not all members take advantage of that. Some choose not to. There's different requirements in the Senate and the House, and I'll let the House folks talk about their side of things. These are targeted investments, and they have real and direct benefits on the communities we serve. Members have used this opportunity to request funding to support and improve things like healthcare services, education, economic and community development, transportation, public safety, among other worthy causes. As Vice Chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee, Senator Collins has secured more than $500 million for main projects for FY22 and FY23. Currently, there's more than $580 million pending for 231 projects across all 16 counties in the FY24 appropriations bills currently being negotiated by Congress. Only nonprofits and state and local governments are eligible to apply for CDS funding. We do get requests from businesses and individuals and whatnot for funding. That's not what the CDS program, the Congressionally Directed Spending Program, is about. This is about helping municipalities and nonprofits. The opportunity should be viewed as a way to jumpstart an activity with one-time federal funds to help kick it off. It's basically we want to get a new project off the ground. This is a good way to do it. Each office has their own, creates their own application for organizing CDS grants. Broadly speaking, Senator Collins' application will ask for a clear and defined budget on how you will intend to spend the funds, which appropriations bill and account you're seeking funds from, and if awarded the funds, how the project will become self-sustaining. Job creation, job saved, economic benefit, justification to taxpayers, if any portion of the project would be subject to outside approval. So i.e., for example, if it's a town looking to fund something like a new fire station, does it have to go before a town meeting vote? So when you submit it, it should be submitted with, include any local match or any other project components that are gonna be part of it. How much money is the organization putting towards the project? i.e., is there a local skin in the game, or are you looking for the federal government to take care of everything? At least 3 letters of support. You can do more than 3 letters, but we like to see at least 3 letters of support. And eligibility, this is important. Eligibility guidance and what we ask for on the application are all subject to change in future rounds. And I say that because I've been with the senator for 20 years. And over a decade ago, they had earmarks. Then the earmarks went away because Congress said they didn't want to do earmarks anymore. And then back in 2021, we had congressionally directed spending opportunities come back. So Congress could just simply say, we don't want to do these anymore. Or Congress could say, we want to do these twice as much as we've done last year. And consequently, the application process is going to look different this year than it did in the past year. Where we stand right now, we haven't started the ball rolling on application process because the FY24 budgets have not been finished yet. Generally, those are done by the end of December by Congress. Currently, we're in what's called a continuing resolution. And if Congress so chooses, by March 4th, 4 of the budget items will be taken care of, and by March 8th, the other 8 budget items will be taken care of. And so the FY24 budget will be completed by March 8th if Congress chooses. And then after that, if Congress wants us to go forward with congressionally directed spending, again, the application process will be starting shortly after that. So I think I'll skip any further than myself and move on.
Thank you. That's a really great sort of overview of the overall process. I'm gonna get into the weeds a little bit more, just because I think that will complement and talk about just like what will happen and some things that we always recommend folks to talk about. So we will not have any warning pretty much of when this process will start. We'll get told that it's gonna go open up. We'll have maybe a week or 2, and then there'll be 2 weeks for you folks to get your applications in. And then we have a very short timeline to review and make recommendations. So the House could start first, the Senate could start first. We could be synchronous, we could be totally asynchronous. We just don't know, except it'll be in the general time period. I think 2 years ago, the Senate went first, and I can't remember. Anyway, it's varied. And so the applications are going to be a little different. And I always recommend folks in our district to apply to Congresswoman as well as the 2 senators. Maximize your chances of being reviewed. And there is communication that goes on. The House is generally limited in how many we can forward, just because we've got 435 or so House members and there's 100 senators. So I think last year we had 15 and they were set at $1 million or less. We sent in a couple more than $1 million, and through the appropriations process, they were reduced down. And they have to pass the FY24 budget and in order to know if any of these are actually going to be funded or not from last year. So you're applying for FY25, meaning the money will not show up until will not become available until the FY25 budget is passed through appropriations and signed by the president. At that point in time, you will need to go through the normal application process for whatever appropriation you receive. So if you got a sewer grant, you're still going to have to file all the paperwork. You're still going to have to do the PIS and all the other stuff. You are guaranteed the money as long as you still qualify, but you're going to have to do the formal application. So this puts you to essentially this funding puts you to the front of the line. So there will be a guidance document. Generally, each of the offices have a guidance document, and it's important to review what appropriations are included for the House and the Senate. It's not every possibility. So sitting here in the room, I met 2 years ago. He wanted to get had one project to try to get a boat refurbished for marine debris collection and things like that. There was not a line item you could stick it in. So, if we receive an application and we realize that you put it in the wrong one and there's another one that would work, we will move it, or we will tell you, we will move it for you. And if we can't tell, we will, because both the senators, Senator Collins and Congressman Pingree are on appropriations committees, we will just like ask the committee. And I think probably, everybody does that as well. So sometimes we see projects, we're not sure if they're a good fit, but we will try and get them in there. And so there will be a lot of projects to look at. Some of them will get forwarded and some will not. I encourage people to apply because your project or whatever you want to do gets seen by everybody in our office, at least. We get a gigantic spreadsheet going, we list everything, and this is a huge thing for our office. And we look at all of them, and those that we're always disappointed that the number we can forward is so small, but that means during the rest of the year, we know that you were looking for something. If we see other funding opportunities, if we see grant application opportunities that we think you should apply for, we will, we'll flag them for you. And I don't know if that will happen or not, but it really helps us understand much better what the needs are for you folks that are working in the nonprofit and the local communities. And that influences our thinking and our priorities throughout the year. So it's not, for those of you that apply for grants about your grant making process, as you know, that is really long and complicated sometimes to get to the end. This is relatively easy compared to, relatively speaking, compared to, I was looking at, I had not looked back at our categories, but I was kind of looking for, you're gonna need to describe the project for us as well. I would, and then you can do attachments. So everything's going into a spreadsheet for us. So, just don't give us more than 100 words in filling in the blanks, but you can send attachments and everything gets put into a file and associated with that project. I can afterwards, if it's helpful, send what we used last year, which is still up on our website, but our CPF guidebook and what we actually funded this last year. So some of that is up there. It will change because we don't know which, mostly it'll change because we won't know what appropriations we will have access to. And then sometimes they just throw in like, we aren't gonna do any arts projects. We aren't gonna do any fire. Wasn't that 1 year, no fire department?
Right.
Yeah. There'll be some odd sort of, I can't explain it.
I think it's because other grants are specifically targeting a fire department, so they kept that out.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's not that, obviously, Congress funds a lot of fire departments, but so there may be some philosophy or just like we are already doing a lot of it. Some categories tend to get a huge amount of applications in them. EDA, so if you can find, I'm not sure I think it's helpful if you can find one that maybe is one of the less easy ones to end up with 50 or 60 different projects in them, but get it in the right one. Get into the one that's the best fit. And if the one that's the best fit is the one that probably everybody else is applying for, well, so be it. If you have a good project, it's good for us to know about it. The support letters are helpful. Keep in mind, just like imagine what it's like for us in the office to go through 100 or 200 applications. So being succinct, we're going to rely more on those. You're going to get a Google form to fill out from us. So what you put into that form is probably what most of us in the office are going to look at. And the other documents that get added are like, if you want to go a little deeper, we will look at those, but we're probably going to go off what's in the Google form to a large degree in trying to understand the project. So we want to make sure we can understand the project from what goes in there. It's really worthwhile looking at, there will be links to the various appropriations, information about what those appropriations are, what kind of projects they fund. I would spend a little time looking at that, trying to evaluate if you have a good fit. If you can't tell, contact our office with questions. There will be a email to send for questions, and we look at those. You know, there is no email that comes into our office that is ignored. Somebody reads it, somebody figures out, you know, right, if you haven't asked for a response, you won't get a response, but we look at everything. I think, I'm sure all the offices in the state take their responsibilities to understand the needs and the priorities of every citizen in the state very, very seriously. And this is a chance for us to see the projects that we might not normally see. You're gonna be applying through a federal agency and we may never know about them. So, yeah, hindsight, so I encourage people to apply and to take advantage of this process.
Well, that's it. I guess we can just start opening up the floor for questions.
I just want to ask if Zach or Cole had anything that we had overlooked.
Yeah, I guess the only thing, I would just emphasize, we're looking for projects that are shovel ready, so, projects where the money is sort of the last money in. These aren't funds that are gonna, if awarded, sit for 3 or 4 years until the rest of the money comes in. I think Jeanne sort of touched on it, but depending on the account, there are different match requirements, so local match, and it's really important to understand for the particular project where the funds are coming from and what's already in for those. I can't underscore enough the timeline. This isn't necessarily a quick process, so you may find out that it's moving ahead in our process, but it could still be a year or more out, as I think it's been alluded to. The folks who applied last year still don't know if their projects have been fully funded. And then the last, I think, is just to really look closely at what accounts we do have access to and read the requirements. They're pretty clear for the most part, but if you have questions to ask, some of them have requirements in terms of where materials are sourced from. And it's just really important that the project meets the criteria. And we have ways of asking if it's not clear, specifically with staff on the committees.
Yeah, and I'll add a couple other points of detail. There's a couple of sort of requirements that are true over all CDS, at least on the Senate side. I believe they're on the House side, but I'll defer to you all on that as well. That includes CDS funds can't be used to reimburse costs that have already been incurred. So that's a big one. We know that folks are excited about their projects, but you know, if you get a start on something without having completed your environmental review, you know, all of your contracting with the agency that's funding the request, the funds could then be voided because you've already begun the project without having gotten approval. So, you know, keep that in mind. Couple other things, you know, sub-granting isn't allowed. That's one thing that we have seen a couple times that people have asked us to, you know, so if you were the recipient, but you wanted to then, you know, redistribute the funds to a sub-agency, another nonprofit, that would also make you ineligible for the funds. And so we want to avoid these sort of issues coming up at the very end of the process, particularly if your project is funded. And then we get to this point where you're interacting with the agency to get the final, you know, disbursement of funds. And then there's a huge roadblock. So we want to sort of clear as many of those problems as we can before the process starts. I'll talk a little bit about the process after you apply. So the application process, as Jeanne had mentioned, is pretty quick. It's been quick in past years. It's liable to be even shorter this year just because we're working through the appropriations negotiations a little bit later than we typically would. If there's, you know, that kind of thing. The sort of the first step, right, is you submit to us, to our offices. The offices review them internally. And then, you know, based on the sort of whether you comply with guidelines and all of that good stuff, we'll then request the project to the appropriations committee. At that point, the appropriations committee and the agency staff with the agencies who would be funding the projects will do their own review of the projects. That can take, you know, it can be as quick as 1 to 2 weeks. It can be more like 1 to 2 months. And during that period, they may come back to us as the member staff with questions about your project. So say, you know, you've given us a budget and you have, you know, a certain number of line items, but they're concerned about one of them because that may be, you know, that may be an eligibility issue within their own guidelines. They'll come to us and ask us for clarification. And based on that, we would come to you all as the applicants to discuss, you know, how the project might need to be changed a little bit, or just get some clarification, supporting documents to come back to them with the answer. After that point, we sort of have, you know, maybe 1 to 3 months where the appropriators are, working through drafting their bills. And then we come generally in the sort of late spring, early summer, early fall to the markup process. And that's when the committees have their bills where your projects would be included if they were funded. And they consider the full bills and whether or not, certain projects are included. That's when you'll sort of have the first sense of whether or not your project has made it to the next step. If it was included in that, at that point, that's a very positive sign. Projects are typically not removed once they are included in the draft bill and then goes to consideration for the full Congress. But I'll qualify this by saying, as we've alluded to, that everything is subject to change. There's no guarantee until the president's name is on the bill. So just be aware of all that as we're going through this. And then, we're supposed to finish appropriations at the end of September. I cannot remember the last time that's happened, probably where I was born. And so we'll obviously keep you all updated if your project's included, if it's not included on the ongoing negotiations and the process and the timeline. But there's gonna be a couple months of sort of, we'll have to wait and see. But so just be prepared for that. We've been sort of generally advising folks that at a bare minimum from the date that you apply, it would be certainly no shorter than 12 months until you get funds in hand. And it's much more likely to be closer to 16, 18, and longer if there was to be, a major eligibility issue with your project, which again, we try to keep those as rare as possible, but things happen. So that is something we've seen. So just want to make sure everyone's aware of that. Another thing that I would suggest is all of our offices are required to disclose the projects we request. And then we do, we do information, or at least Senator King does information on which projects are funded. And you go right to our website, king.senate.gov. We have a tab for CDS under services. Good idea to just kind of parse through that. And I can give you an idea of the kinds of projects that have been funded in prior years. So that might be a good resource as well. I think that's all I had.
Any other last thoughts before we open it up to questions?
Yeah, we touched, each of the folks up there talked a little bit about what wasn't appropriate for CDS funding. And I just want to kind of circle back on that a little bit. Some of the things to avoid: salaries, overhead costs, stipends, grants and loans, school construction, fire trucks or fire equipment, but not fire buildings, fire stations. Those are okay. Proven technologies such as solar panels, EV charging stations, and broadband. That could all change, but in the past, those are the directions that Congress said we're not going to be looking at those with CDS funding.
And I'd add one more to that we've heard in the past, specifically from the Department of Housing and Urban Development. One of the largest accounts is called the Economic Development Initiative, and that's because there's no matching funds requirement. It tends to be one of the most used accounts. There is a provision that has been in that account for the past couple of years that prohibits the use of funds for buildings for general conduct of government. And so that, if you're looking at a town hall plan, it doesn't automatically mean you can't fund a town hall through that project. And there are other accounts that have been opened in the past that can be used to fund town hall that we've used. But it does mean that, if you're looking at a town hall meeting space fire department combination, there are ways to write that application that whereas you're using CDS funds for the fire station and not necessarily for the town. But these are all, that gets a little bit more granular. So as you're sort of going through what your needs are, we're all here as resources to help you answer questions and best write your request to be successful.
You said like 14 to 16 months roughly.
I mean, I have to qualify that and say, I can't guarantee it, which I know sucks to hear, but but yes, I think that's typically the kind of time frame that we see. It's about 14 to 16 months.
Some of the other things just to be aware of is the grants have to follow the same guidelines that everything else has to follow, so EPA and whatnot. And that includes the Build America, Buy America provisions. So if you're building a building and you need steel for it, it's going to be American steel that is used on the project. And some of your construction folks may not recognize that, and you don't want to get too far down the road.
Anything else before we open up the floor to more questions? So we will go back and forth. We'll get people in here as well as people on Zoom. So we'll start with, if there's anyone out in the audience who have a question first, in the back there.
Yes, thank you. I'm Nat Hussey. I'm here on behalf of the Chickasaw Island today, and if I understand correctly, you're suggesting that it's okay to have an application into not only the two senators' offices, but the first district congressperson's office as well. So is there any risk there of things either being redundantly processed or dropped because somebody thought something else was doing it?
Head shakes there.
No, because remember, we only get 10 or 15, so the House has a very small number they're sending through, so there's a lot we won't be able to say yes to. So we have a tendency to like say, we couldn't fund it, but we wish, and I think there's redundancy all the way across the line sometimes for some projects, just makes it stronger. Yeah, so I've had somebody call up and say, we only applied to you because Senator Collins funded us last year. It's like, no, that's not a good strategy. Don't do that.
It makes sense. If your project has to be approved by all the members of the House and 100 members of the Senate, might as well get the 2 senators and the 2 members of the House on board early.
And is the application window similar for House versus?
It won't be lined up exactly though. It might be 2 weeks apart. You might get all the guidance from the House first, and then like a week or 2 later, or our deadlines might be tighter. So really pay attention to the deadline date for sure, because that's,
So you're saying send the same application to all?
yes, that's what I would
And
recommend.
each office is gonna have a different application, so you wanna look at our websites for those applications. A lot of folks contact us early and we get them copies, as Jeanne was saying, copies of what's passed in past years. And we set up our spreadsheet on what we expect is gonna be coming forward early. So it doesn't hurt to make contacts early.
And I think to Cole's point, it's all publicly disclosed on any of the websites, so you can go and look at anybody's projects that have been funded in the past, and that gives you a sense.
All right, we got I do see you.
Yeah, so I work with Senator King, with Cole on CDS and Matt Hoffman. I think one key point here is that while there are discrepancies in terms of deadlines and like small differences in terms of the process, if you apply to Senator Collins' office, the application form is very similar. And the questions, I would say 90% of it is similar. So if you've already applied to one office, House or Senate, it kind of behooves you. It's not a whole another grant application. It's basically taking most of what you've already prepared. So, you know, we tell people it'd probably be like not even like another, you know, half an hour of answering questions. The discrepancies are quite small. So once you've done one application, you might as well apply to the other 2 offices. The other thing is, like, we're not here as like your judge or like your grant reviewers per se. Like, don't hesitate to ask our offices any questions. We're not gonna deduct you or look at you unfavorably. Like, we're here to get the best applications in front of our members.
And the questions we ask are simply the things that we figure that our member would want to know the answers to. And so that's why we ask you.
So we do have just quickly on a person on Zoom, where can we find categories and timelines? I think the timelines are very.
Those will be, I mean, detailed information on due dates, and I think in terms of categories, the accounts that are open to CDS, that'll all come out once we're given guidance from our respective appropriations committees. Certainly will be posted online. So, because we haven't finished the fiscal year 24 yet, we don't have the fiscal year 25, which is the next cycle. We don't have that information out yet. But once we wrap things up in that budget process, we'll move along pretty quickly to that FY25 stuff. So I would say stay tuned.
Typically, but we run it in March, April, May time, so it's definitely a spring activity. And so we would be looking, February would be way early because of what's going on. So I would expect late March, April, to the degree that we can predict any of this.
Yeah.
And the deadline ends just so that the members can, on the appropriations committee, can start doing their work during the summer.
Barbara Wright, Wednesday. seems like there's a little thread in the middle that needs to be done. On the one hand, you want shovel-ready projects. And on the other hand, you don't want to reimburse or anything spent. So there's a moment in project, for example, where you gathered enough community donations to have hired an architect and have the plans drawn up and have a contractor. And then it's shovel ready, but we're not gonna get reimbursed for any of the fees that haven't been done. Right.
There is sort of one, I'm not gonna call it exception, but there's sort of a variation on that in which, you know, you can request CDS funds for a project if it's considered a discrete phase of a larger project, right? So that wouldn't be a reimbursement, but that would be saying, you know, this is, we're doing, you know, a new fire and police department, we've done a police department, this would be for the fire department. So, and then we can, again, this gets pretty granular and detailed, so that we can always talk about it, you know, over email or a phone call, we're always happy to do that.
Walter writes, I'm also from South Alabama. I'm here representing two nonprofit boards. The comment about shovel ready, is that the preference of Congressman Golden, or is that universal? Because, is it Chuck? I jumped on your comment about jump starting a new project. Those seem to me to be inconsistent.
The idea is that we want, projects that have broad community support. And Congress looks at its role as being the jumpstart to the engine to get it going. Okay, we're not gonna be there to keep it going, you know, through the CDS program. It's to help get things started and move it along.
And it's helpful to go and look at what has been financed in the past, so. I think we did 7 sewer projects last year, so these are communities that are, you know, it might be, I think we did a mobile home park. They're very hard to, you know, finance otherwise. And they had wastewater leaking into the drinking water system, which gives them a sense of urgency, and it was a discrete project. Shovel ready, I think at least to me, it means this project's gonna go. It's not speculative, so and that you are ready for whatever, so if somebody's asking for $2 million for a $40 million project, and we can't really see that it has a future because you haven't got any plans for how to get the rest of the money, that one's not gonna be as attractive as one where, you know, you can do it sequentially, or we know that if we provide this money, it will be spent. And some of it is building things, but some of it is, you know, there's planning and some other kinds. So I think it was one where community here wanted to have EMTs going and visiting people so they would stay in their homes as long as possible. So that was kind of building onto a health clinic that was already up and operating, but adding a new piece of the operation that the community was strategically looking ahead to doing, but didn't have any resources to do it with yet. So you may have a large project and there's, it's like, yeah, you just have a piece that if you've got this done, you haven't got the resources for this, but you had it, you've got enough momentum that you're absolutely certain you can get it done.
Right. We do have one question online. If an organization is actively fundraising for a capital project and this funding is to be allocated to that project, does the organization need to keep your offices updated on how much has been fundraised? On how much has been raised as our application moves through the process?
I think that's sort of getting at the question of matching funds, if I'm understanding correctly. It's sort of a delicate balance here. You know, when you go to apply for CDS funding, you know, there's an understanding that you may not have in hand every single dollar of the match that you'll be required to demonstrate if you were to be funded in that project, right? Particularly because, as I mentioned, this is a 14 to 16 month process or longer. What it really comes down to is whether, as the applicant, as the organization that's applying for these funds, whether you believe that you can secure the funding for that match by the time the appropriations process finishes. And that's because when you go to sort of execute the paperwork with the agency after Congress passes all the appropriations acts, they're going to require documentation that you have the funds at hand to make up the match, whether it's 15%, 25%, 50%. So, you know, we obviously want to see that there's, you know, community support, whether that be in the form of fundraising, and we certainly, you know, if you're asking for, you know, $3 million out of an $8 million project and you have no information on where the other $5 million is going to come from, that's going to be a question that we have and that we want to touch on. But if you can demonstrate that, you know, you're actively raising funds, you have some funds already secured, and that you're well on your way to securing that matching, you know, portion, that is generally sufficient. Now, we evaluate that case by case, so, you know, there may be follow-up questions, depending on what your application looks like. And I'll just say that that's the case for our office. Other offices may do things differently.
That's where letters of support can be very valuable, and they show that, you know, your community is committed to, making a difference. Or that they are working on, you know, that this is secured, that they have the match ready, or the additional resources. It's not the only reason to have a letter of support, but that is one area that you can help convince us as we review it, that the matching funds are real.
See the question right behind you, actually. Is there a place to sign up for a notification when this process opens up, or do communities need to keep checking?
We all have a list that we keep. So, and you know, Max, we can like just, you can ask to be on the list, and you just like send it out to
That's
everyone.
not that's their question. Although I would like to be on the notice.
Yeah, so
You're
but you all have our emails, and I think like our office has a list of town managers that I would assume that, you know, we will send this out to all the town managers in District 1, and then other folks that have, we keep a list of.
There's a lot of deliberate outreach around the
Yeah.
process.
We want everybody that wants to apply to know about it and get a chance to apply.
Right, we don't want you to miss the deadline.
Yeah.
Because everything at the deadline, once the deadline passes, it's very difficult to move forward with anything after that.
And sometimes, you know, when we're reviewing it, it gets really weird because certain appropriations will be moving faster than others. So we've got to batch them and get them in because maybe Department of Agriculture is going to be working on their appropriations 2 weeks after the deadline. And Interior is not going to be working until a month later or something like that. So after it gets in, it's kind of a crazy process, which can be probably gathered from our efforts to try to describe it. But in Maine is really, it's really worthwhile in Maine. You have members of Congress on the Senate and House side that are both on appropriations committees. That is really, really important. And I think I saw the senators are top performers in terms of, you know, nationwide, in terms of earmarks and being able to move them, both of them. And all of our projects that of the 15 weeks selected, you know, so far have made it through the process. So this is a state where it's really worthwhile to spend the time and the effort.
And I think someone did mention earlier that, you know, to my point earlier, this is extremely competitive, right? There are, you know, there are hundreds and hundreds of applications and not every request gets funded. That's just the nature of the project. You know, it's because of how successful it's been for so many folks. A lot of people are interested, and that just drives up the number of applications, and there is only so much funding that goes towards this. So that's something to be aware of. But, you know, this is sort of one avenue of, you know, lots of different opportunities that can help, you know, you secure funding for whatever it is that you're looking for. So consider this as sort of a way to break the ice with an office, or, you know, to start a conversation about looking for federal funds for something, but it is not the only avenue. This I think Jeanne mentioned earlier that this is, you know, another grant will come across our so we then let you know about that one that might fit your needs for wastewater treatment or something like that. So, you know, obviously this is a great opportunity, but it's not the only opportunity.
Jeremy Martin had his hand up a while ago. Jeremy, do you still have a question?
I do. Thank you. Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. I appreciate it. I guess my question is related to, I work for the town of Camden, and I don't know if Congressman Pingree's office mentioned the project. It's a sewer project at a mobile home park here in Camden. We applied, or CDI applied for the town in the mobile home park. It's a cooperative. We got funding, you know, in the last round, and we're still waiting for this process to play out. And those cost estimates that we worked on were, you know, a year. Now they're working on almost 2 years, it seems, from when that initial estimate was done. With inflation and everything else going on, that project has, the price, we've had new engineers look at it, and the project has increased considerably from that initial estimate. And I know it's not your fault or the individual congressmen and senators' faults or women's fault, but it's the way it is. Is there, I guess, two pieces? Probably not a way to go back to seek more funding for that project, or is there a way to add to some funding that we've already are earmarked for coming out of the March 4th hopeful, or March 8th, whatever date that is, for the HUD and transportation budget? Does you understand the question, or should I just try to seek other funds? There's not a lot of other funds out there, and I'm you know, trying to knock on every door possible for additional funds for this project. So I guess two parts to that. Can we go back at all? Probably not. And secondly, can we apply for additional funds for the same project? If that makes sense.
Yeah, so I would say that in some cases, depending on what you were funded through, obviously everybody's sewer costs have increased. And so depending on the specific program, and I don't know the answer for this one, they may already be incorporating a process through the grant you'd be authorized through, I can't remember if it was DEP or rural development, to be able to address those increased costs. So and that may be something you may want to inquire and just find out if that could be included in the process if you got this award. I guess I would say that it would be good to continue seeking other funds because I think everybody's got the same challenges.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. But
Okay.
and come back. I mean, we say no, but at least we're aware of what's happening, and you know, that is helpful in terms of looking at the regular appropriations process at the same time and knowing that those things are challenges. But we do know that those are a challenge. Yeah,
and then should I just reach out to you folks individually to try to understand this a little better? Probably.
I would. So back in, was that a rural development or was it a state revolving fund, or do you know offhand?
No, this was funding directly, you know, congressional directed funding that Senator King and Collins's office got for us. It was a $1.3 million project.
It goes through a regular appropriation, so it would have. So when you actually get it and can apply for it, you're going to have to apply to rural development, or I guess EPA has their own process for the sewer projects through the CDS. Yeah. So find out, inquire with that agency right now whether they have a way of addressing inflation costs for those kinds of projects. That would be the first thing I would do.
Okay, I appreciate it. And then I guess another question: if a community, and maybe this is for others too, and what might be helpful, if a community or an entity received some of this funding, you know, a year ago, is it worthwhile applying for another project, or do Congress folks and senators like to spread the money out to various communities, or will they send it to the same community, you know, a year later for a different project?
It depends on the project. If the project is great and very necessary to the community, then everybody's gonna jump on board and say, yeah, we need it, even though we've sent, you know, XYZ community, you know, 4 projects in the past 2 years.
Yes, I did 2 years in a row for a sewer project, and you know, they had sea level rise, and it was badly needed, and everybody recognized it. Depends on your competition, which you will not know, but if you don't apply, you know, you aren't going to get it.
Right, understood. Thank you so much.
Any questions in the room? By chance? Right. Well, I don't have too many other questions. So we've been talking about communities, but would this be something that, say, at a county level, could be applied for, and it'd be the same thing just through the commissioners and whatnot?
It's a government office, yes.
There have been county funded projects in the past.
And Maine is unique in that counties aren't quite the entities they are in other states, so I think towns have a lot of power in New England, Maine, Massachusetts in particular, but county government is absolutely, would qualify.
I don't want to hold up if I have multiple questions then. I swear this is my last one. You mentioned the 3 letters of support. Is this something that could be from 3 different departments in the town office, or should be spread out from different nonprofits, or what would be some examples you think of?
The beneficiaries of the project. So I would get 3 letters from those folks who, if it's a town-wide thing, I would get different segments of the town to write letters of support. You can do more than 3. This helps to show the members of Congress who was supporting this project. And if it doesn't have broad support, maybe it's not something that is gonna be going for.
I would say recipients and collaborators, or people that you're working with to make it happen.
I mean, obviously, if a town submits a project, the town administration likely supports the project. But, 3 letters of support from 3 selectmen isn't necessarily as good a demonstrator of support as, say, a local nonprofit that does work in the same space, maybe the fire chief, if that's relevant, or neighboring communities, if there's sort of a multiple community impact. But it really does, it depends on the project itself. So that's sort of, we leave the specifics of who you request letters of support to up to you. And of course, you can also request letters of support from more than 3 folks, and then choose among those letters what you think makes the strongest case for your project.
And I don't think we limit the letters of support. I've seen 7 or 8 projects.
I would say though, that, keep it to Mainers. You laugh, but we have had letters of support from outside of Maine, and that's good for them.
Be interested in hearing about those types of projects.
Just keep in mind that we have a short time to understand the importance of your project, and so we're looking for information in the application that really helps us understand. And that's kind of, it's just common sense. It's like your letters of support, your project description, your budget, your ability to get to the end of the project. We're looking at the importance of the feasibility. And we want to support projects that would ultimately send that back. We've only got 15. So we absolutely want them to be projects that are going to get done and benefit some people in the community that need it badly.
We did just get a question popped up, and I think it's been answered earlier. Would quasi-municipal or municipal corporations like a water district be eligible?
Yes. Well, it's nonprofit.
As long as it's a nonprofit.
And we've had water districts apply for seed funding, and I think probably all 3 fiscal years, so.
Well, if we're not getting other questions, I know I lied a minute ago. I do have just one more, and that is just final thoughts. The big thing that anyone listening today should take out of this meeting, like what's the big final impression you want to give to everyone? Zach?
I would say read the directions and reach out early, if you have a project, to make sure that it is a good fit. And like it's been said multiple times, we're happy to work with folks to make sure that it fits the correct category and really understand the project. But don't wait till the last minute because somebody else will. There's so much time.
A lot of folks look at it as a way of trying to fill an immediate need. Also look at it as a way of trying to chart a direction for your municipality or for your nonprofit. Try to figure out a goal setting. Is this a good direction for us to be going in, and how do we get there? And can Congress help share that vision?
Not every project is a good fit for this process. You've heard what the sideboards are. You have to be willing to be patient to get the money. There's not really, we won't know till we have a presidential signature, 100% sure that you're going to get it. So be strategic in identifying and selecting your project. And don't rely on this funding alone this is like a possibility for funding and getting your project completed. And we will do everything we can to, make a worthy project move forward, but it's still a laborious project to get it actually in. So just don't send this in and think that's gonna be enough. You're gonna have to keep working hard on that and.
And I think I would say, you really don't lose anything by applying, it's, if you're sort of on the fence, or you think it's eligible and you've had a conversation with us, and it's, it's a project that your community needs, then, we certainly welcome the application. The worst thing that can happen is that it gets denied, and then you have a relationship with our office, and we can figure out other opportunities. So again, consider this one part of, how we can best support you all. That's what we're really here.
I have one question because it relates to something that you just said. Obviously, I have money pending in this budget. Obviously, until they pass the budget, the president signs it, I know it's not gonna go anywhere. I did get appropriation last year. And I was told by the agency that it ended up going through was, because I thought it was, oh, great, I got this money. Turns out they said, I did get it, but they said, no, we actually can say no to you if this doesn't fit within our criteria. And I'm like, wait a minute, Congress is controlling the purse strings here, and you're telling me that you ultimately can refuse to give up these funds? It didn't work out that way.
Yeah, so, if somehow we sent through an application to buy a boat and that was not eligible under that appropriations, they could say no. If you apply for something that's not fundable, and I would assume that that's what they meant, and that's why, Chuck and others were talking about how we want to make sure as we go through the process, there may be questions. I would assume that's what they were saying, that they, when you did the historical review of the site, there was a huge Indian burial underneath it, then that might, so things can come up, but.
I was just kind of taken aback by that just a little bit, but, and the 14 to 16 months, did just for an observation for anybody. It's pretty much the way it worked out.
You're hoping maybe March-ish guidelines be out.
We're optimists.
We're gonna keep saying March until proven otherwise, I think, but it could be April. And I'd add one more thing, just to your point, is I think that this is speaking from my experience. There are very few projects where you actually get to a point that the agency, where the funding was appropriated and the agency says, no, you're not getting the funding because of an eligibility issue. We try to, and that's for projects that made it all the way through the budget. Obviously, there are tons of projects that unfortunately don't make the cut, but for projects that are in the final appropriations bill, we're able to work generally with agency staff to resolve those issues. Sometimes it means it takes funds longer to get into your accounts, into your town's accounts. But it's very, very rare that a grant would actually be canceled. And we do a lot of work to make sure that that doesn't happen, because there have been issues, and we have existing relationships with agency staff and with appropriators, obviously. And we use those relationships to move things along as much as possible. So while it could happen, it's exceedingly rare.
And the earliest would be March 8th, because that's when Congress approves, or hopefully will approve the FY 24. And then after that is when things will start rolling.
Fingers crossed.
And we assume it will, because they could just, it's not in our hands, so they could decide not to do a CDSC. I would be very surprised if that happened, but, anything can happen in a given year. It's like sports, politics and sports, the same in a given game. Anybody can win on a given day, regardless of whether they should. It's like it.
We actually just got another question on Zoom. Like, we're about just one more thing. Are there any guidelines related to the percentage of government funds relative to local funds, either by type of project or the scale of the project?
Again, I think we're talking about matching funds, right, about how much would be required for the applicant, and again, that depends on the account that you're applying under. And it depends on the kind of activity that you're trying to fund. So, I know that's a lot of it depends. I can give an example during FY 23 or FY 24, Department of Agriculture has a rural development account that applies to towns with under 20,000 residents for the last census. And that account, for example, scales down, they'll fund a maximum or a minimum of 35% for towns under 20,000, but then it steps down. So between 20 and 12, or between 12 and 5, they'll fund up to 55%. And then under 12,000, they'll fund up to 75%. So, that's sort of an incentive, particularly for rural communities, to apply for funding, where the federal government is more willing to pick up the share the smaller your community is. But it really depends, and it's subject to change in the next fiscal year. Our guidance documents will have detailed information on each account once once the FY 25 process starts rolling, and that'll have information on the required match. So that'll be in front of you, and that's why we really encourage folks to read through those guidance documents.
And sometimes the match is different in the appropriations than it is in the general program. I have some vague memory that our rural development was like changing it on the fly last year, so. It was, I mean, they were raising it, they're good, there was less match and more funding, so it was going in the right direction, but we were having a hard time getting a straight answer. So read the language that is forwarded, when it goes out about how that appropriation is gonna be treated through the CDS or the CPF process. And appropriations are messy. They're really, really, messy, so, I equally wish we could be more precise and give you a better sense of exactly what's gonna happen, but right now, you know what we know.
All right, there's been another question put in there. I thought we were gonna end it 5 minutes ago, and the new question just keeps adding in. Can organizations reach out to your offices now, or do they have to wait until? There's the nods.
Don't need to wait. They should like it when you are in touch early.
Yeah, don't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
We are having
Really?
meetings right now, all of us, with folks that are contemplating an application, and a lot of times there's folks that have applied in the past, and they kind of know the process, so they are just saying, can we talk to you about what we're thinking about this year?
It's really helpful to do that, because staff turnover happens. And I can tell you that I'm on a high learning curve, but I've been appreciating all the Zoom meetings that I've been doing for the last few weeks, to get up to speed on what the projects have been that are looking forward to coming forward in this cycle. And it's been great just to learn about what's going on.
Well, we have the room booked for 2 hours, and we're only at 3. Part of what we could do, if you're all willing to stick around, is if there's anyone who has a potential project they have in mind and just want to sort of get it out there, I can turn the recording off if you're worried about everyone else hearing. But does that sound all right? Just sticking around? Anyone want to throw spaghetti at the wall and see what sticks? We got one hand up. Tom?
Oh, Tom, you have to unmute yourself.
I got it, thanks. The only thing I would say is that it would be very helpful, I think, as you're laying out a program like this, to maybe use some PowerPoint or some sort of, media to be able to show like contact information, things that we would, areas we want to call, examples of some of the categories, the different offices, contact information for those offices, things like that, where it makes it real easy. So as you're taking notes and trying to learn more, you can it's more of a plug and play. It allows you to put some of your ideas to those particular areas, the things you're showing, and talking about examples of some of the projects that have been successful would be nice, and things like that. And just a couple ideas that I thought might be helpful.
I think all of their websites have, like previous.
So I can send an email afterwards, it's just like shows people where to go on the Congresswoman's website to get that information.
Yeah, that is actually at the bottom of all the newsletters that Emily and I have been sending out. And what we were planning on doing when the recording's all done, we'll send out another blast saying, here's the recording for those who can attend. And if you wouldn't mind leaving your contact information, we'll include that in the newsletters as well.
So
projects people would like to share while there's some time? Anyone?
To Adam's point earlier, we're not here to like critique or knock down, we're here to guide them and make a really good submission, so, yeah. Or you can reach out to us later and we're happy to set stuff up.
The other thing I just say, like, when you get the email with the appropriations information from last year, it didn't change a whole lot from year to year. I mean, there's maybe 80% stays the same and,
Senate side, we added one account.
yeah, we lost some, but ours changed a little more, but it tends to be fairly consistent. It's a good sort of screening tool. Is added or different, you can see if there's something that's a better fit.
Well, if we're not, any hands up, then we can end early, we'll stop. Anyone who wants to stick around, just chat, feel free to do so. Thank you very much. We know you're busy, and as you just mentioned, you get a lot of Zoom calls and conversations with everyone interested, so it's very appreciated that we even come down to do this today.